listening to The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Janelle Elgaway.
Good evening and welcome to the Doctor's Corner on CAW 360 Network. I'm Janelle Elgaway and we are here with Dr. Kline. Welcome, Dr. Kline. How are you this evening?
Couldn't be better.
Good. Tonight we will discuss problems that we have within pharmacies. Please call in with only questions on this topic tonight. If you do have a question, you could call in at 415-915-2291. You can also chat live with our audience on YouTube channel Conspiracies Against Wellness live stream. So this evening, Dr. Kline, you and I were having a discussion before the show about the word guidelines. Can you share with the audience what you were telling me about on this subject?
Yes, guidelines means different things to different people, but it's definitely something different for doctors.
Okay. And what is that exactly?
Well, when I was practicing in Boston about 30 years ago, a lot of the nurses were developing what are called pathways. And I thought, what is this? What it is, it's trying to linearize the practice of medicine. Somebody comes in with shortness of breath. What do you do next? What do you do next? What do you do next? In other words, make a cookbook. I visited a whaling ship, and I looked at the big medicine chest they had, and there were instructions in there. If you had diarrhea, you took something from bottle 1 and bottle 4 and bottle 6. And if you had vomiting, you took something from bottle 8 and bottle 9. And I kind of laughed, and I thought, oh, gee whiz, that's really cookbook. Well, guess what? These pathways then turned into algorithms, then they turned into other things, and then they turned into guidelines. Now, guidelines sound like something that's, optional. We have guidelines in our neighborhood, that you're supposed to keep things clean and blah, blah, blah. But if you don't, nobody comes and arrests you. But the way it's worked out for doctors is if you don't follow these guidelines, you are malpracticing. Now, that's not true. And
right.
Mm-hmm.
So the CDC guidelines, when a doctor hears that, what are they thinking? What did they see?
When a doctor hears that, they think this is the rule.
So this is law.
And if I vary from the rule, this becomes law for us. In other words, anybody who publishes guidelines, it becomes law. In other words, if you vary from those guidelines, then you are negligent. So this restricts any kind of intelligent doctor, who's trying to solve problems, because then they look at the guideline and they go, uh-oh, I didn't get an MRI. Well, maybe getting an MRI was stupid and a waste of money. My own practice, I get very few studies because I only use them to confirm diagnoses. So I don't order very many MRIs. I don't get MRIs of knees because I know what's going on in there from the examination and the history. But you see, if there's a guideline that says, oh, this is what you do for a sore knee, you get an MRI, and then somebody's liable to come to me and say, Dr. Kline, you didn't get an MRI.
Right.
So how come?
So when these CDC guidelines were made, and they called it that, they intentionally knew that doctors would think, well, this is law then, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Even though it says within them, this isn't law. These are suggestions or
Well, it's a 50-page single-spaced document, and if you word search it, you'll find the word voluntary in there one time.
Mm-hmm.
So no, they knew very well when they published these. They knew very well these were going to become the law of the land, and look what's happened.
Right.
My page. Yep. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, no, please go ahead. I want your patient.
When I talk to people on Twitter, almost 95% of the time, their doctors are saying, oh, it's the CDC guidelines. That's the reason we have to do this. And then to make things even worse, it's not even in the CDC guidelines. So if people took the 50-page CDC guidelines to the doctors, would you mind showing me where it says in here?
Right.
Because none of them read it, of course.
Didn't they have to make an amendment for the word opioid, too?
Yes. You know, I got into an argument with some other doctor that opioid was the proper word. I've always used the word opiate. The best word is narcotic. Because then fentanyl is not an opioid, and you know, you get into all this, opioids plus fentanyl. If you use the word narcotic, you got them all. And people don't like the word narcotic, too bad. It means a drug that makes you sleepy. It's a great word. Yes. I lost my train of thought there. I got
we were talking about the word
tangent.
we were talking about the amendment. Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to cut back on my donuts.
Too much sugar there.
It's affecting my memory. So to use the word opioid, the Nixon law in 1970, they had to amend it to add the word opioid so they could use it in their communications. Anyway.
Right. We have a call. Would you mind if we took one quickly?
Sure.
And we'll go into everything else. Oh, never mind. They dropped off. Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about pharmacies. What did you exactly want to talk about? And we do have some mailbag questions too from the audience that we could go into whenever you want to do that.
Well, for the first show on the topic of pharmacies, and we plan to have others, and maybe invite some experts, is what's happening. We need to know what's happening to people, stories from people about what's happening, so we can figure out how to address the problem. So we're looking for little stories and reports from people. I mean, I don't go to pharmacies that often as a patient, so I don't know what goes on there, so need to hear.
Okay. All right. One of the questions we had, somebody said there's a new law out that says taking both pain meds and benzos now requires a pharmacist to call in a doctor before filling the prescriptions. Is this true?
I've not heard of this. This is an example of mass hysteria. Rumors. This is a symptom of mass hysteria. Rumors. Oh, there's a communist cell down the street. I saw them the other day. Then you drive down there and there's nobody living there. That's what happened in the 50s. Witches, same thing. Now it's with opioids. All these stories. So you got to check each one of them out. I was talking to a woman in Pennsylvania, and she said the pharmacists there all told her they couldn't accept out-of-state prescriptions. So I called up the pharmacy board in Pennsylvania, and they said, "Oh, of course, that's not a problem." So everything in here you got to check out. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have not heard this.
Okay. And is this just with opiates, or is it for other medications as well? And when did this start, if it did do that, right? Well,
opiates are a special kind of medication that everybody's afraid of. They should be afraid of alcohol. That's a lot worse. And cocaine and amphetamine, those are terrible drugs. But we've latched on to the opiate group. So that's what the focus is. The focus used to be, it rotates. There was a very good show on History Channel. It rotates. First it's marijuana, then it's cocaine, then it's crack cocaine. For a while it was ecstasy, then it was speed, right, and dextroamphetamines.
Yeah.
And now it's opiates. It's kind of a rotating thing. So now we're on the opiate case, but much, much worse than ever before, because now we've got 5 to 7 million casualties. Wow. And those casualties are coming from pharmacies refusing to fill, coming from doctors' offices claiming it's a CDC regulation. God help them if they ever get into a courtroom and somebody says, well, I couldn't give them the medicines. It's in the CDC regulated. The lawyer comes over with the regulations and says, here, show me.
Right.
Doesn't say that anywhere in there,
CGF from YouTube asked, why is the CVS chain's job to tell us we can only have 5 days worth of opiates if my doctor prescribes 7 days worth?
Good question. That's called nullification. If the federal agency Okay, nullification is trying to ignore a federal law. That's how we seceded from the Union. In other words, you just ignore the federal government. So there's in the Constitution, it's called the Supremacy Clause. If the federal government passes a law, the state cannot pass a law contradicting the federal law. The federal law set up FDA to write all the rules for prescription drugs. There's no rule about limiting prescription drugs in the FDA, what we call package insert, which is their official language for the use of the drugs. So the states are doing something that's unconstitutional, and nobody's really brought it up. You can't pass a state law that interferes or tries to supersede a federal law. So they're wrong.
We have a call.
It's idiotic.
Yeah, right.
It's idiotic because now, I mean, what everybody gets 5 days in the emergency room? What kind of doctoring is that?
Well, and if you're sick, how are you supposed to be able to fill it every 5 days? I mean, like, you're not feeling well, so you're going to have to get somebody.
Office and pay.
Right. Or if you're...
No, you got to be seen to get another dope prescription. So you got to jump over to the doctor's office. It's just, This is what happens when you've got mass hysteria. You've got ignorance.
Right.
This is ignorance.
We're going to take a quick call. Caller from area code 406. What's your name and what's your question? Hello?
This is Dr. Ibsen. I don't have a question. I just agree with you, Dr. Kline. Mass hysteria. The 5 most fearful words in the English language. Something must be done.
Yeah, and a guy on a radio show brought up an interesting idea. It's not fear in general. It's the fear of something unpredictable. In other words, we're all afraid, we're going to get shot, as a bystander in a drug war. I mean, that's a realistic kind of fear. But the fear of opiates, the fear of witches, and the fear of communism, those 3 things, all are this nebulous, kind of like unpredictable, like nobody really knows what's going to happen. So if you said you had 3 dope addicts in your front yard and you asked people, which I'd like to do, what are you afraid of? Tell me what's in the back of your mind. And I don't know the answer to that because I don't think people know. And I think that's much more fearful than fear of something you do know.
Right. Doctor,
what do you think of that, Dr. I?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I think it's terrorism, basically, and physicians in particular are terrified because they know that any investigation that happens of your practice is going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not your entire livelihood. And so the fear of an investigation by your state board or a fear of an investigation by the law enforcement departments of either local or DEA, that just strikes terror in the heart of doctors because they know that they overcharge doctors, and then they can charge you with Medicare fraud because essentially not only does nobody document perfectly, but nobody bills perfectly. So everybody knows there's imperfections in their billing systems, and that every single doctor in the country is vulnerable to a Medicare fraud accusation, which will cost you another $200,000 to get out of it.
Yeah, it's also fear of the unpredictable. We don't even know what's going to happen. If you go and hold up somebody in a convenience store, you got a rough idea. You're going to get 3 to 5 years. We have no idea what's going to happen. Are they going to come and take my car? Are they going to take my home? Are they going to take my license away? And this stuff is just going on daily, and it's the fear of the unpredictable, I think. So we're kind of all in the same boat, us doctors and patients out there. And I don't know, maybe we should all move somewhere, some remote
or at least I'd like to offer the idea that we could all come together. There's a couple of posts on a thread today about, a movie star who overdosed on heroin and was resuscitated, and damn it, I can't get my pain medicines, but this movie star can be saved from heroin. Well, that's chicken and eggs. I mean, that's a completely different thing. And people who've noticed that their doctor is no longer working for them have noticed something extremely accurate. They aren't, and they can't.
Mark,
go ahead.
Are you getting reports from your patients about difficulties at the pharmacy? I know you don't have real active patients right now, but are you just hearing on the grapevine of people having trouble at pharmacies?
Oh, totally. Yeah, that happened before. While I was still treating pain patients, patients with prescriptions from me were having problems at the pharmacies. In fact, the only pharmacy that reliably filled prescriptions that I wrote for patients for controlled substances was Kmart, and they just closed. So essentially, it's essentially a war zone here, a wasteland, particularly given that pharmacists, the same prediction of unpredictability that you were talking about, and we should all be in the same boat instead of fighting each other. But the pharmacists here basically said, oh, there's something bad about Dr. Ibsen. I can't really remember it. I must not fill his prescription. Because the response that they give, I think they're trained to give this response. The response is, I'm not comfortable. Well, God damn it.
All right, Dr. I got to cut you off there, Dr. I. We're trying to get some input. We're only going to have a 30-minute show tonight, and want to find out more about these pharmacy problems.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ibsen, for calling in. Bye. The question I have is about every time, if you get a 5-day prescription, the patient has to go and fill that. That's your copay. I mean, so that's another thing. I mean, every time I go to fill something at a pharmacy, I'm going to have to pay my copay. Like, so 5 days, 5 days, 5 days. A lot of us, right? I mean, what do you think about that? Because a lot of us don't have a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, that's something I never thought of. So write that down on the list. And when we get our expert pharmacist person in, we'll have them address that, because I don't know the answer to that. So we need more questions like this to give to our expert.
Can a person die if they suddenly stop taking pain meds that they've been on for a long time?
One thing that's always said about heroin addicts withdrawing, and of course everybody's going to go through the same withdrawal whether you're a heroin addict or not, but they are on a little higher dose, so their withdrawal is a little worse. It should never die during a withdrawal. So if you don't die during a withdrawal from heroin, you're not going to die from a withdrawal from prescription pain meds.
How can a pharmacist legally change or refuse to fill our doctor's prescriptions?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. My understanding is they cannot do that without calling the doctor. They have the right to refuse because that's an important role they have. If some doctor prescribed some strong heart medicine and they knew the patient was allergic to it, they wouldn't. But they are required, I think, we'll find out later, they are required to call up the doctor, and see. So these are, this is an important question for discussion later when we have our expert.
Okay. How do you expect, is it Gnarrk Scare to affect us at the pharmacy? Do you know?
Gnarrk Scare is a very pernicious, dangerous, proprietary software for money that the states are buying, and they claim to be able to come up with an overdose risk score based on the CDC guidelines. Now, the CDC guidelines are basic, which are, are really under a cloud for having any kind of scientific validity. And we've been trying to ask these people what criteria they're using, and they won't release it. It's patented, so they feel this is proprietary. So this to me sounds like something that we've got to get some lawyers in on. I mean, you can't profile people and not tell them what's going on. This is the old profiling thing. If you're black and you have tattoos, you're a criminal.
Right.
Or if you're a white woman with different color hair, because you're trying to be hip, you're obviously a dope fiend. So, you can't do this in this country. We have a democracy here. You can't go running around and, papers, please.
Right.
That's what it is, So we got a guy who actually, when the doctor left the office, he snuck over with his phone and took a picture of this Gnarrk score, and he was turned down for his medicines based on his idiotic score. Nobody who goes to a pharmacy is ever going to overdose on pain medicines. Now, sometime I'll explain that, but it's true. The only people that are going to overdose are addicts. So this program needs to be done with addicts, but since they're not on computers, there's no way to analyze the data. They're analyzing the data like if you go to more than one pharmacy. Well, everybody goes to more than one pharmacy nowadays because they're refusing to fill your prescription. So now they're going to put this stamp on your forehead, and you're going to not get any pain medicine the rest of your life. So that's Gnarrk Scare, and we'll definitely ask our pharmacy expert about that.
Okay. Presently, we have some people in Oregon who are being denied opiate coverage from Oregon Medicaid. Do these people have any excuse to get their medications back?
Yeah, they need to go into federal court and get an injunction, and hold a cake bake sale and raise money and hire a lawyer and go in and get an injunction. You can't do that. You can't do that to Medicaid patients. They're protected by federal law. Half of them have disability, so you can't. They're in a protected class. I was involved in Boston with this horrible institutional setting for adults with developmental delays. It was just a horrible zoo, and a bunch of the parents got together and held car washes and bake sales, and they raised the money, and they got a lawyer to go into federal court. And the federal court judge came down and looked at the place and said, "Are you people sure you want to go ahead with this trial? How about we just have a consent decree?" So, this is what can happen, but everybody needs to get together and throw in some money and, hire a good federal court barrister, and you've got to go in and block the state. They can't do this to people. It's just horrible. And it's illegal. You can't,
Well, some of it seems like, are they just trying things? Like, I feel like certain states are putting things through, because a lot of people are asking me, well, are they going to take CPPs down to zero, basically, and, and is it going to be like a statewide or a nationwide thing? Are they just trying to, like, throw out and see what sticks? I mean, even with this Gnarrk Scare, I mean, do they really believe that this is going to help? I don't.
Yes, when you turn people loose, the people who want to punish other people, which is basically what it is, when you turn these people loose without any controls, they'll just try to get away with anything they can. During the communist scare in the 50s, I mean, they were, they were accusing neighbors of being commies, and they just do anything. And they started to pass local laws then. If you were a communist, you couldn't work for the school board. They had loyalty oaths. Before you took a job, you'd have to say you weren't a communist. I mean, it was the same sort of thing. So, people just have to hold car washes and get the money together and hire lawyers. That's what it's going to take. Writing articles in the newspaper and everything is not going to work. I mean, it's okay to do that, but it's not going to work. You have to get the courts involved, and that's why we've got a separate judiciary. In Mexico, they do not have a separate judiciary. It's part of the government. So you can see where they would get in Mexico with this problem. But we have a separate judiciary. And so people have to go to court to block these idiotic things. And then, they need to publicly humiliate the people who started this. This is, this is horrible.
Well, and the worst part of it is these people are sick. I mean, they don't know how to change these laws and do things. I mean, some of them are becoming advocates and stuff like that because that's their only choice. But, it's really difficult for patients to even know what to do with all of this, So that's why it's important that we do get somebody to start doing this. Why isn't there more going on?
Well, you're right. I mean, when people are sick and they can't get off the couch because they're not getting enough medicine, it's hard to fathom them, going down and becoming, carrying a placard or something. But, this is what needs to be done. And, you can get friends to help out, too. You don't have to do it yourself. If people are stuck at home, you can get on the phone, get some friends, call your church, get them involved, call your shul. If you're Jewish, call the mosque. If you're Muslim, I mean, get together with these religious groups. This is fundamentally a violation of human rights. The right to be treated for your pain is a United Nations basic right.
Yeah. There's a
So
divine assignment. Divine Assignment on YouTube just said chronic pain is a disease in a protected class under ADA.
That's
like
right.
What you're saying. Yep.
Yep. You know, it's the same as if you're African American. They're in protected class. You know, so again, we got to go to. None of the lawyers are interested because they're all afraid that the mass hysteria is going to poison the juries, and they are poisoned. I mean, Dr. Ibsen called. He knows a fellow there that was accused of manslaughter because one of his patients went out and took about 19 drugs and killed himself, far and above what the doctor prescribed. That the jury convicted him.
Right.
You know, I mean, they're all afraid. See, they're so afraid. Everybody is so afraid. Oh my God, get this doctor out of here. Get him into prison or something. You know, he's going to be infecting all of us. We're going to be, you know, dope fiends. And that's the kind of hysteria that's going on, you know. So that's why they're reticent.
Yes. In the middle of June, Kentucky's Attorney General sued Walgreens, alleging that the company contributed to the state's opioid epidemic. How can pharmacies be blamed for the opioid crisis or epidemic?
They can't, and you can't blame the manufacturers either. The reason we have an opioid crisis for 100 years is the federal government. The federal government interfered with the practice of medicine and tried to make medicines, diamorphine, which is heroin, they tried to make it illegal. And then Nixon tried to control every single drug that just might make somebody a little weird. So it's the federal government's fault. You know, if I passed a law that we're not going to sell any more cigarettes in the United States, what do you suppose would happen? You know, it just doesn't solve the problem, but it's morally driven. Yeah. If you tell somebody that we went through this in Prohibition, and why are we doing it again, they look at you like it's not even a valid question. Like, what? See, it's morally driven. There's something else driving this, and what's driving it is fear of the unknown, fear of the unpredictable, and it's not the pharmacist's fault, and hopefully we can address that question, too, when we have our pharmacist expert on the show.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap up here soon. I just wanted to know if you could tell us a little bit about what we can expect coming up here in the next few weeks on the Doctor's Corner, and what are you looking from the audience?
Well, I need problems so that we can problem solve. You can't problem solve without a problem. So we need to know exactly what's happening. We've mentioned a whole bunch of them today, you know, pharmacists being blamed and the 5-day prescription and blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to invite a pharmacist person onto the show who's very knowledgeable in this stuff, a lot more knowledgeable than me, and plus knows how the pharmacy system works. And so hopefully we can do that next week. And we'll continue the discussion on our Tuesday shows until we solve it, because I think the pharmacy problem is enormous from what I'm hearing. I mean, we did a Twitter poll, said 40% of people were having a problem with the chain pharmacies, 1% with independent pharmacies. So we'll keep dialogue, and then we'll just have a show for general questions. And we'll send in your questions, too, and we'll put them in the mailbag. And then we'll pick out the good ones of general interest, and we can present them at the beginning of the show in the mailbag.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so if anybody that's listening out there, if you have questions about the pharmacy, about, you know, anything within that has to do with that, please, you know, write into myself or Dr. Kline, and we will answer those coming up here with our guests.
Part 2.
Professionals. Yes, part 2. Any last words for this evening?
No, but I would encourage people to let us know exactly what kind of problems you're having with the pharmacies, and which pharmacies. You know, just name them. And if you're in a particular city, name them. You know, in Raleigh, if you don't pay your taxes, they put your name in the newspaper. Well, I think it's time we start putting the names of pharmacists in the newspaper who are doing these things to people, and we have documented cases.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that later.
All righty, sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kline, for joining us this evening. And thank you, Carnation, for joining us on another Tuesday evening at the Doctor's Corner. I'm Janelle Ogoy signing off for the evening till tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we're going to have Dr. Stephen Henson as a guest, and we'll be here at 8/7 Central. Have a good night.
You've been listening to The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Janelle Ogoy. Copyright 2018 by EXG LLC. All rights reserved.